So we are combating the anti-Semitism and the defamation of Israel by showcasing, in fact, that in the Middle East there is peace that is being made, that countries are coming together, unified, and that is creating better stability both for Israel, but I think for the world as well. And so my foundation is promoting and reinforcing and talking about these important issues because I think it's a new narrative.
Well, welcome to the podcast today. My name is Jeff, and my guest today is the first time that he is appearing with us, Avi Abraham Benlolo. And Avi is the founding chairman and CEO of the Abraham Global Peace Initiative. Avi, welcome to the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with you.
Well, the pleasure is ours, and we want to talk about this subject of anti-Semitism. And as you know, we represent a Christian audience, and it's something that I think is very important for Christians, especially to understand. Everyone should understand it. Please don't get me wrong, but I think that those of us who say that we believe in the Jewish Messiah should understand this topic a little better, and we, I think, have a part to play as well. And so there has been a significant rise in anti-Semitism in recent years. For those who are maybe unfamiliar with the term, just give us your definition of anti-Semitism. What is it exactly?
Well, said very simply, although it's actually challenging to define at times, but said very simply, it's Jewish hatred.
Mm-hmm.
That is what anti-Semitism. I say that it's difficult to define because anti-Semitism has changed and continues to change throughout time and age. It still is Jew hatred in every single episode, but for well over 2,000 years, some would say since the destruction of the first and second temples, in fact, the Jewish people have been pursued because of their faith, because of their religion, at most times, and then sometimes they've been defined according to race. Now, we are actually not a particular race of people, very much like Christians. There are many races of Christian people. There are many races of Jewish people, as there are of Muslim people. But,
Right.
in fact, when you look at um, uh, uh, Adolf Hitler, he had tried to define us by a race as a race of people, so that he can create a race hierarchy. And if you recall, he even created various scientific experiments and measurements and so forth. And that was kind of Darwinism. And so when I say that anti-Semitism changes and manifests differently throughout time and place, it's exactly that. It changes, but it still remains hatred of the Jewish people.
Yes. Now, we, as you mentioned, understand that this is something that has been around for a very, very long time. And at the outset, let me apologize on behalf of my tribe. Any thing that can be laid at the feet of Christianity, we certainly are horrified by that, and not the way that I would understand the Christian faith to be. However, we recognize that the organized church was involved in this, and really, sadly, in early times, really behind it in many ways. So, but let's talk about today. Can you tell us some of the ways that we're seeing more and more of this, that it's manifesting in our world today?
Sure. Firstly, let me commend you for acknowledging uh, the Christian faith. I think it's important.
Absolutely.
Realization, that self-realization, which is really important, can actually for that hump. And get us over anti-Semitism as well. More importantly for me, to be honest, because I have a lot of friends in the Christian world, like a lot, and I'm proud of that friendship, and it's important to me, and I feel that that actually has brought us closer together, that kind of connection. So, for all your listeners, I would say self-reflect, be free to admit it. We as Jews don't honestly we kind of move on and we don't harbor any ill will. We want that acknowledgement, but more importantly we want that friendship, so it's important to us. For all your Christian listeners, just to know outright, the sorry, and the question that you had asked me was the manifestation of anti-Semitism
Yes.
as it currently stands. Look, it's a big answer, so I don't know how much time you have, but anti-Semitism in the last 2 decades, particularly, has been increasing at a very, very rapid rate. We had post-Holocaust. We kind of call it in the Jewish community a honeymoon period, where the world said, okay, the Holocaust happened. 6 million Jews were murdered because of anti-Semitism, by the way. And
Yeah.
now, take a break from anti-Semitism, um, you know, and most of the world, not that it wasn't there, but since probably about 2000, 2001, we've seen a very steady and increasingly rapid growth in anti Semitism. And in fact, in most countries around the world, when you look at statistics, and that includes Canada, America, France, Germany, Britain, Poland, and the list goes on, it hovers about at a 35% increase year to year, especially
Wow.
since COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, it's actually shocking. And so in Canada, where we're at, we've seen that the Jewish community is the most targeted religious group across the country. And when you think about it, we've been here 250 years, part of the fabric of life in Canada,
Yeah.
proud Canadian, and we're very surprised about it. And we can talk about some examples because over the last couple of weeks there have been some shocking examples coming from government and government consultants. And so, but just talking statistically and for a second, the anti-Semitism is basically coming from two primary sectors, maybe three. Number one is there's what we call that traditional anti-Semitism, that is coming from the, we'll call it white supremacy kind of group, neo-Nazi type of
Right.
groups where they adhere to the Nazi ideology. And that is kind of like a traditional form of anti-Semitism that we've seen even since the Holocaust, a rising of these hate groups. So that's one. And by the way, they're very dangerous and very violent. We've seen attacks, for example, in Pittsburgh, which was a white supremacist neo-Nazi who
Right.
went into a synagogue and shot 11 Jewish worshippers. So that's an example of what it is that I'm talking about when I refer to that. In Europe, it's actually even more shocking, where you have rising, ultra nationalism. And sadly, they're marching in places like Poland and in Hungary and other places, with swastikas and adhering to the Nazi type of ideology. So it's shocking that 80 years after the Holocaust and after World War II, that these people are back. So that's one of the groups. The other group that it's coming from, and I said three groups. Remind me. So the other group that it's coming from is the Islamists. Unfortunately, there has been a growth from extreme Islamists to promote anti-Semitism, and they've done that throughout the Middle East with the republishing of things like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, and other works.
Hmm.
But we also see especially in Europe. Now, why Europe? France has been especially affected by violent Islamists. Now, not only targeting the Jewish community, which is a very, very important to think about and consider. So you remember the Charlie Hebdo massacre as an example.
Yes.
So that was an example where both the newspaper was targeted by Islamists. The journalists were, the Islamists went into the newspaper headquarters and shot up the staff, murdered the staff, and at the same time they targeted the Jewish community. And so somehow we always get into it, dragged into it. And on one occasion, the kosher market on a Friday afternoon on the Sabbath, you have Jewish people who are going shopping to prepare for the Sabbath meal. And so this Islamic terrorist again entered the kosher market on a Friday afternoon and took the Jewish people there hostage and murdered four of them. In fact, I hosted one of the survivors of that attack in my home, and
Wow.
she was just so scared of being a Jew in France that she uprooted her family and moved to Boston.
Mm.
Most French Jews have moved to Israel, but in her case, she moved to Boston. So it's the Islamic anti-Semitism has impacted violently the Jewish community, and then you have another form of anti-Semitism, which is actually probably possibly the most dangerous, which is very, very excessively left wing academic anti Semitism that is coming from university campuses.
Right.
And here we've been back 20 years, and I really mean 20 years, on university campuses. That you have students who are politicized against the state of Israel and are doing events like calling Israel an apartheid state. So Israeli apartheid week. Of course, Israel is not an apartheid state. Very far away from being an apartheid state, actually.
Yeah.
And promoting things like this boycott and divestment sanction campaign, which is to boycott Israel. And so what they've done is they've used and leveraged the university campuses right across. It started at the University of Toronto, it spread like wildfire right across the world to sow hatred against the Jewish state and, by extension, a lot of anti Semitism. And that's resulted in a lot of Jewish kids feeling victimized.
Sure.
And so that's what's happening on our university campuses. It's very dangerous because when you think about it, the ideology is changing, and you have now four generations of students who have graduated universities who may believe, if they bought into it, may believe that Israel is an apartheid state, or that Israel promotes BDS, or Jews are colonizers, which is completely false, or Jews are not indigenous to the land. Well, if you believe in the Bible, and if you read the Bible,
Yeah.
you'll know that Jews belong in the land of Israel. There's no question. Everywhere you go in the land of Israel, there's Jewish artifacts. There's evidence in the ground of Jewish presence. And
Hmm.
so to call Jews colonizers and to say that we are not indigenous people to the land is absolutely false. But yet that's the narrative that the other side is sowing, and that is breeding a lot of anti-Semitism. And so those are the three streams of anti-Semitism that we in the Jewish world are dealing with today.
It really is quite alarming that, you mentioned 35% increase year over year. And that's, you're not talking about somewhere across the pond, Europe or the UK, or you're talking about Canada and America as well. And I just find that that's just a huge increase. And so if we talk about sort of a revival of anti-Semitism that began in the early 2000s, this has grown astronomically in the last 20 years. that's a significant increase. And these incidents that we're seeing, you know, here's how I feel. I feel like we have enough random, violence and hatred that happens in the world to have this targeted hatred towards a group of people who believe a certain way or who identify with a certain way of life is just really a troubling thing.
Look, it's affecting us,
Hmm.
but I want to tell you one thing. I think it's dangerous for everyone. I think the Jews are basically the canary in the mine. That if you look at past circumstances, and history always dictates the future.
Right.
You know, it is all societies. And it doesn't matter what faith you're at. If you're sitting on the back bench and you say, okay, it's just affecting the Jewish people, so what? They're used to it. Big deal. They've had to deal with it for centuries. You're wrong because you know what? They're coming after you. You know, again, we think about the Holocaust and you think about this one evil man and his henchmen, you know, concocting this narrative. And then hundreds of thousands of Germans buying into it and being deceived and propaganda and brainwashed into believing this. Now that turned the entire world upside down. And so even when we say 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, don't forget millions of Christians, millions of political dissidents were also murdered in the Holocaust. Not
That's
only
right.
that, but if you want to add up the numbers, 50 million to 60 million others, whether they were fighters, whether they were civilians, whether they were Canadians who went over to liberate Europe, 50 million other people were killed
Wow.
in World War II. Like, think about that number. Okay, it's bigger than most nations, and so it all started with hate. It
Right.
all started with the biggest hate crime in history, with the Jewish people. And so, if you want to think about where it is the world is headed, you know, and where you're planting these seeds right now, where anti-Semitism is increasing. This is not a Jewish problem. This is a we problem. And so I would say to you and to your listeners actually that we need your help.
Hmm.
The Jewish people, when you ask most people, how many Jews do you think there are in the world? I've had people who give me throw out crazy numbers. Oh, 100 million. You're so impactful. 100 million. Oh, or 30 million. Well, you know what? We're like maybe somewhere between 14 and 16 million people.
Yeah.
We're completely insignificant. We really are. And the land of Israel is completely, even though it's the heart of the world, it's just the heart, but it's not significant in terms of landmass. And so
No.
we need help. We need, the Christian world, the Muslim world, everybody who holds good values to stand up and speak out like you're doing today.
Yeah. And this is a great opportunity for me to say to anyone who's watching, listening, to heed that call. We especially as Christians need to stand in the gap for Israel, for the Jewish people, and stand against and speak out against this kind of anti-Semitism. You brought up the Holocaust, and recently you wrote an article for the National Post about the Judensau's dark history. For people who are listening, what is the Judensau exactly, and what does it represent?
Well, again, it's something that is shocking. So the Judensau is basically translated a Jewish pig,
Hmm.
and it's as you know in Judaism, we are not, you're an Orthodox Jewish person. We are not allowed pig, pork. We're not. It's commanded. And so the pig is something that, people who are anti-Semitic have used kind of against us to kind of taunt us, to upset us, to shove it kind of in our faces. I mean, whatever. It's people have
Yeah.
crazy minds, but they think they're that. Okay, whatever is your fancy. But um, you know, so the Judensau, in the article that I wrote about was, as you know, of course, the Holocaust started in Germany,
Right.
and Protestantism, in fact, started in Germany. And unfortunately, there's a strain of anti-Semitism, within that movement, a very strong strain of anti-Semitism within that movement. Now, unfortunately, some of those churches actually put up motifs on the walls, embedded on the church walls, outside external walls and in this case, of an etching of a pig, of a sow, and with it is kind of a caricature of a rabbi lifting the sows kind of behind, and what looks like Jewish kids. You surmise from this Jewish kids kind of suckling at, the sow's, underbelly. We'll put it that way. And so, and this is a sickening image. I mean, it would be sickening for anybody, right? I mean, think of just
Well, yeah.
superimpose a Jew
Yeah.
for any other. I mean, it's come on, really, right?
I was going to say this would be offensive. This would be offensive for any person caricatured in that way, and I can't imagine how something like that could be okay for anyone.
For anyone. And so, but it's important to understand that. So this was created around the 15th century. Of course, anti-Semitism predates that, but everything is so to understand how our world works in this way is everything is layered upon layered. So when you see that kind of anti-Semitism, which we'll talk about a little more, but and then you ask, well, how did the Holocaust happen? Well, the German people were already predisposed. The churches were putting this on their walls, right? I
Hmm.
mean, it's there. The evidence is there, and so it's very easy to carry forward. The Hitler narrative wasn't created by Hitler only. Okay, it was, he used the predisposition, the
Right.
ideologies that were already sown into society to, as a cause, and so that's what needs to be understood. When I walk, I've taken about 10 missions to Auschwitz of mostly non-Jewish people, and they always stand in the middle of Auschwitz and look at all the barracks and say, how how is this even possible that
Hmm.
1.2 million people were murdered here? Well, to answer that question, you need to look at the Judensau. You need to look at, the mythologies that Jews poisoned wells in order to create Black Death, or you need to think about, various concepts, deicide, Jews responsible, for the murder of Jesus. I mean, I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but to carry those things forward for centuries, um, is really shameful, and that's what created the Holocaust. And so, uh, Germany recently ruled, and this particular case of the Judensau, surprisingly, the place where the birthplace of the Holocaust, it was ruled in the German Supreme Court that it's okay to leave that there in place with an explanation underneath it of what's wrong with it or what it is. And to be honest with you, it's frankly shocking because it's Germany. Because Germany, frankly, I have to say, Germany has made incredible inroads in its relationship with Israel.
Hmm.
Germany and Israel have a very unified relationship. The president of Israel was just there, marking the Munich massacre that happened 50 years ago.
Right.
Germany condemned anti-Semitism, continues to condemn anti-Semitism, even though it's on the increase in Germany. Surprisingly, it continues to condemn and to also pass laws very, very strong laws against hate speech and hate crime. So Germany, as it should, has been doing quite a bit. And then for it to allow the Judensau on the churches, and by the way, for the churches to not themselves want to take it down, to us is especially shocking and very, very disappointing.
I would agree. I would agree. And you know, there's so much about this that doesn't seem to add up. You know, it's illegal to, you know, you can't be a Nazi in Germany. You can't display the swastika, and yet this is okay. It's there's something here that's just yeah. It doesn't
Yeah,
match, you know, for me.
yeah, and no, it doesn't matter. Perhaps again, this is what I said. What I said. Perhaps if there was more outrage from
Hmm.
people outside of the Jewish community, because it seems that it's always us that are speaking. That would convince them to change, right, with the
Exactly.
times.
Well, I certainly do applaud
Yeah,
yourself and others like you who bring this to our attention because in many cases we may not even you know hear about a ruling like this in Germany here in Canada unless somebody you know brings it to light, and I think it's important that we hear and also agree with you. It's very disappointing that the Catholic Church would not itself you know be proactive and take the step to remove it rather than have it as a potential stumbling block and offense. It really is surprising that
yeah,
that hasn't occurred. Yeah. Well, you know,
yeah,
there has been we've been talking about this and the tension, I guess, sometimes between Christianity and the Jewish faith. You know, Jews have been persecuted severely in the name of Christianity over the centuries, and in more recent decades, I am happy to say, you know, Christians have begun to abandon many of them and repent of their anti-Semitic ways, and to even embrace the Jewish roots of their faith. And certainly, one of the things that we try to do is to travel to churches here in North America and talk about why it's important for us to not only embrace the roots of our faith, but to support and bless the Jewish people. What do you feel is necessary in order for this healing to happen and for trust to be fully restored between Jews and Christians moving forward?
yeah. I mean, as I said before, I've made tremendous friends within the Christian world, and it's been a blessing. I have to be honest with you. It's been an incredible blessing to me
Good.
in my relationship. We bond a lot. I have running friends that we run together and we talk religion. And one person is Christian, I'm Jewish, and we bond over biblical philosophies and so forth. And I think that that's really what it comes down to. My relationship with David Wells here in within your own church has been just another blessing. And he'll know if he listens to this, he'll know what I mean because he's really reached out to me as well in my times of challenges.
Hmm.
And so I think that is really the answer to your question. I really think it's that people to people relationship, ability to be open with one another, both about the past and the future,
Yeah.
and really all of those stereotypes that we know. I think we can both give so much to one another because we have so many similarities. We're
Right.
grounded in the Bible and in our faith. And as a traditional Jew, to me, it's a wonderful thing when I talk about these things and these philosophies with my friends and colleagues in the Christian world. So I think it's that person to person. The other thing that I wanted to tell you was, I've just recently, formed a relationship with a museum in Jerusalem that is created and funded by the Christian community in America, And I think it's great that they've built. They're the Friends of Zion, so they believe in Zionism
Yes.
and the Jewish presence, Holy Land, and I think it's commendable that they are investing in that and and helping strengthen Israel, because that is the other area that we need support with, the strengthening of Israel as the Jewish state. And I'm proud that Israel today protects the Christian the Christian places of worship.
Hmm.
I don't think you're going to get that anywhere in the Middle East. The Christian world has been almost eradicated. When you look at Lebanon, that had a strong Christian, or when you look at Syria, Iraq, all of these places, Christians have had to flee. Their churches have been, burning. And so there's only one place where, as a Christian, I think you can feel totally comfortable and safe in, and that's the state of Israel. And I
Right.
think that that's an important thing and something important to say.
Absolutely. And I certainly recognize that Israel is a beacon of democracy in an otherwise darkened Middle East where that is, talked about. And so we certainly do recognize that. And if you're watching or you're listening and you have opportunity to get to Jerusalem at some point, if you're a Christian, especially, go to Friends of Zion. There's an amazing undercurrent of story throughout history where Christians, and especially in more recent years, have helped and supported and blessed Israel. And I know that is something that's being heard and recognized by Israel and by the Jewish people in this day and age, and we really are thrilled and privileged to be a part of that. Honestly, listen,
Yeah, we do. And
sorry, go ahead.
no, I just wanted to point out one more thing regarding what I said before, which is really the persecution of Christians in the area, which is, of course, the Coptic Christians as well have suffered in Egypt. I mean, they've
Right.
been ISIS, beheaded. If you remember those terrible and gruesome images, and so I think there's a very important relationship that can be had between the Jewish people and the Christian people, particularly in that region, and I'd like to see more of that.
Yes. Yes, so be it. And I think too, you mentioned this, and it's so important that we recognize it. We all know, where we differ, but let's not focus where we differ. Let's talk about the things that we have in common and the things that are similar between us. And that common ground, I think, goes a very, very long way in developing a healthy and ongoing relationship. And I think that maybe that's a good thing for people to hear. You, in recent years, have gotten involved in something called the Abraham Global Peace Initiative. Uh, Talk to us a little bit about that. When was it founded? Why was it founded? What's the purpose of this organization?
Sure. Well, yeah, I launched a new NGO from Canada, actually, called the Abraham Global Peace Initiative, really based on the principles of peace in the Middle East. And so the idea in Canada for us, especially, is that look, we are known as a nation that promotes peace and tolerance and human rights and democracy.
Yes.
We can have tremendous impact. Yet there aren't that many organizations that are actually doing this kind of work. In fact, the Abraham Accords itself is not particularly well known in Canada, and so my organization is out there in the world representing Canada in the promotion and influencing of this piece. That piece is important. It was launched in 2020, and alongside Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan. And I believe more countries are coming aboard. And so what we're now seeing is a situation in the Middle East where you have an alignment of countries that are trading, that are traveling to one another, that are communicating, that have exchanged diplomats,
Hmm.
and something that is just magical. And what's that? What that's done is several things. I want to tell you because we're talking about anti-Semitism, and I'm going to be giving a speech about this at the Jerusalem Post conference, so you're getting a little bit of a heads up. So what's that done is what it's done is basically is it turned the anti-Semitism on its head. So here in the West, in the diaspora, we're talking on campuses. People are saying on campuses, Israel is an apartheid state, or promoting BDS, well, none of that is being discussed in the Middle East. None of that is relevant in the Middle East. There is trade between in the billions of dollars between Israel and the UAE today. BDS is completely insignificant. If you stand in Tel Aviv and you look at all the skyscrapers and you ask anybody, has BDS impacted you? They'll start laughing at you and they'll go, "Come on, Avi, really? Are you being serious?"
Right.
So we are combating the anti-Semitism and the defamation of Israel by showcasing, in fact, that in the Middle East there is peace that is being made, that countries are coming together, unified, and that is creating better stability both for Israel, but I think for the world as well. And so my foundation is promoting and reinforcing
Hmm.
and talking about these important issues because I think it's a new narrative, and that is that. In fact, I'm just producing a film that is showing you. When you watch my film, you will see that there is a new narrative that's taken place in the Middle East, and the narrative that we hear here in Canada or in the U.S. and from these so-called social justice warriors that Israel is bad, 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 it does completely is old-fashioned. It's old school. No one is saying that in the
Right.
Middle East anymore. They're all working together. There's a complete. I'm not saying everybody loves one another. I'm not. Don't get me wrong, but there's a whole magical thing that is happening. Even Egypt, that has had a cold peace with Israel since 1979, since the peace accord, has now suddenly woken up and is now working with Israel and trading with
Right.
Israel, and had a Holocaust memorial last year, and their school curriculum is changing and so forth. And so what we're starting to see is this important movement, in the Middle East, that is building bridges, bringing faiths and religions together, that I think will be great for Jewish people, Muslim people, Christian people, and that's the magic. And we in the diaspora, we're lagging behind. Like
Right.
they don't know what they're talking about on universities.
Well, that is very, very insightful information, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. It's been a remarkable thing to watch from a distance over the last few years. All of these peace accords taking place, and embassies coming to the city of Jerusalem. Really, quite something, and it is high time, that we highlight this and that people are hearing more about this. How can our audience learn more and get involved with your organization?
Oh, well, thank you for asking that. Yes, we have our website is you can go on our website and subscribe to our list, so you can we send out a lot of briefings and materials about what's going on. Everything that I talked about today, you'll get. So all you need to do is really subscribe at www.agpiworld.com. So it's agpiworld.com.
Okay.
So please feel to subscribe and join us. And just because the more your listeners are aware and the tools that they have to have the knowledge, they can feel comfortable speaking about it and helping defend Israel and combat anti-Semitism. So it's important.
I agree, and just want to encourage you, if you're watching, listening, please go check out that website. We'll make sure we put the address on the screen for those of you who are watching on video. And if you're listening, I'll just say it one more time: agpiworld.com. is where you need to go. Avi, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We really appreciate your input, and hope that we can have you on again sometime.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much. It's really been an honor to speak with you today, and thank you very much for your candor and for your very eloquent questions. I really appreciate them very, very much, and blessings to you and to your listeners.
Thanks for watching. You can listen to this entire podcast on your favorite audio podcast platform. Find the link below. And while you're at it, don't forget to click subscribe and follow us on Facebook so you can stay connected to First Century Foundations.